A major focus of misinformation research has been on recognizing misinformation as compared to legitimate or accurate news. This can be done in several ways. In this video, we will focus on primarily identifying sources of misinformation. We will do so in two ways. First, we will look at patterns in who produces and spreads misinformation. And second, we will provide some easy-to-follow tips for how you can quickly determine if information is from a credible or non-credible source. While there is still much to learn, and while the tactics for spreading fake news continue to change and evolve, researchers have identified several characteristics of users and social media accounts that spread or stop the spread of misinformation. This information is useful for identifying misinformation. So let's start with a look at three main issues related to misinformation spread. Number one, misinformation rarely spreads from users with small followings to users with large followings. With few exceptions, the most problematic COVID-19 vaccine misinformation is likely to come from loud and influential voices online, including those who have been vaccine skeptics in the past, those who are active conspiracy spreaders, and self-nominated experts. Number two, misinformation is more likely to be spread by unverified accounts and users with a history of controversial postings. This makes it easier to identify the major hubs of misinformation. Public health officials should pay attention to popular unverified accounts, especially if they have posted false or misleading information about COVID-19 or the vaccines in the past. Number three, misinformation is usually refuted by other users almost immediately after it is posted. In other words, other social media users are quite good at identifying fake news and misinformation. If a large number of other users are saying the information is wrong, it often is. Outside of these patterns in how misinformation is shared and spread online, it can be helpful to understand how to identify a potentially problematic source. So, how can we do this? We will now review 4 tips for determining if a source or piece of information is credible. Number 1, when in doubt, be skeptical. Unfortunately, even some governments or government agencies have called COVID-19 a hoax, or have created skepticism about available vaccines. But groups that can be trusted as a starting place for information about the vaccine include the World Health Organization, the WHO, or other UN agencies such as UNICEF, various Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, or National Ministries of Health or Public Health Institutes. If you are in doubt about the accuracy of a claim being made, these sources are a great starting place to turn for information. Number 2, ask yourself, does this seem reasonable? For example, is it reasonable to believe that governments are conspiring to control our minds with COVID-19 vaccines? Or is it really possible that vaccines are harming people and no major news outlets are reporting about it? Number 3, look into the source or the claim being made on fact-checking websites like the International Fact-Checking Unit within the Poynter Center, DearPandemic.org, or Google Data Studio. Depending on where you live and work, other sources may be appropriate for you to use. For instance, you can also check for the story on mainstream media sources you trust. If a COVID-19 vaccine is being linked to illness or death, media outlets such as the New York Times, CNN, the BBC, or Al Jazeera are going to report it. Number 4, look for clues in the writing. If the story you are reading is full of spelling errors, grammar problems, or uses things like all caps writing or multiple exclamation marks, you should be skeptical of its information. Or, if the story lacks sources, uses social media posts as evidence, or relies heavily on pop-up ads, be wary. Following these simple tips can help you not only identify problematic information, but also problematic sources that you will want to be aware of in the future. Overall, this video focused on identifying sources of misinformation. Specifically, we identified the characteristics of those who produce and spread misinformation, and we shared some simple tips for assessing the credibility of a source. Identifying problematic sources is important to do before we take steps to actively correct misinformation. To learn more, please continue to tune into our risk communication principles and COVID-19 vaccine misconceptions and misinformation training series.